The mirror on the wall caught her reflection, a beautiful, blue-eyed young woman in a simple dress. But as she undressed, piece by piece, her smile faded. Beneath the padding of her brassiere and the shapewear that cinched her waist and hips, a secret pressed painfully against her conscience. Esther, born Ezekiel Abiola, almost 29 years old, ran a trembling hand over her chest, which was flat, save for the falseness of foam padding, and down to her abdomen, where below the navel she bore anatomy that did not match the body of a woman. David Adeyemi sat behind the wheel of his aging Toyota sedan, trapped in the daily evening go-slow Lagos notorious traffic jam as the sun dipped over the lagoon. Horns blared around him. Okada motorcycles weaved perilously between cars, and the yellow downfall bus ahead belched fumes into the humid air. He wiped a bead of sweat from his temple and inched forward. Commuters in Lagos often spent at least 3 hours in traffic each day, and David was no exception. Yet, despite the frustration of the crawl along Western Avenue in Surulere, his mind was not on the bumper-to-bumper chaos. It was on her. He smiled faintly as he thought of Esther Abiola, the young woman he had met just a few months ago at church. They both attended the lively Sunday service at New Grace Chapel, a Pentecostal church in Surulere, known for its energetic choir and devout congregation. That fateful morning, the choir had just finished a rousing praise song when he noticed a newcomer in the pew across the aisle. She was slender and graceful in a modest yellow dress and a royal blue gele elegantly tied around her head. When the congregation rose to greet one another, a post-worship ritual, Esther had turned to him with a shy smile. "Good morning," she had said softly. Her voice was gentle, almost musical, and David remembered the unexpected quickening of his heart. "Good morning, sister," he replied, offering his hand. "I haven't seen you here before. Is this your first time at New Grace?" She nodded. "Yes, I just moved to this area," she replied. Her eyes darted away nervously for a moment, as if unaccustomed to small talk. But then she looked back at him with warmth. "I'm Esther." "David," he introduced himself, holding her delicate hand a second longer than necessary. In that brief touch, he felt a spark of something, curiosity, attraction, a pull he couldn't name. They spoke only briefly that day, but he learned she lived not far, in a small apartment off Adeniran Ogunsaya Street, and had recently started working as a seamstress at a local tailor shop. She had lost her parents, she mentioned, and come to Lagos for a fresh start. There was a sadness underlining her polite smiles, but also a resilience in the way she strengthened her shoulders and spoke of building a new life. When they parted after the service, David found himself glancing back to catch a final glimpse of her, the graceful sway of her form as she walked away, the sunlight catching the tiny cross pendant she wore. All through the following week, amid the drudgery of accounting spreadsheets at the bank where he worked as a loan officer, David's thoughts kept returning to Esther. Lagos life was frenetic, days filled with work, evenings spent either in traffic or at home under the wear of a ceiling fan when there was power, listening to the distant calls of street hawkers. He was 31 and had lived in the city his whole life. Yet, lately, he had begun to feel something was missing. His mother had been urging him to find a good Christian girl and settle down. He had attended more weddings of friends and cousins than he could count. After all, Nigerians love to celebrate big events, and the average Nigerian adult has attended hundreds of weddings, but he remained single, waiting for the right person. Meeting Esther felt like a prayer answered. Their second encounter was at midweek Bible study. To his delight, she showed up, greeting him with that same demure smile. As they sat on plastic chairs in the church side hall, listening to Pastor expound on the virtues of honesty and purity, David stole glances at Esther. Her eyes were closed as she whispered amen to the closing prayer, her long eyelashes resting on her cheeks. In the fluorescent light, her skin glowed with a subtle radiance. After the service, he walked her home through the warm Lagos night. The streets of Surulere bustled even after dusk. The roadside buka food stalls sending smoky aroma of suya into the air. Groups of young men laughing outside a viewing center showing a European football match. An elderly woman selling roasted plantains by lantern light. Esther held her Bible against her chest and chatted with him about the sermon. "I really like the message tonight," she said, "especially the part about living in truth and love." Her words made David's heart flutter. He found her devotion attractive. "Yes," he agreed. "Pastor has a way of reminding us what is important. By the way, have you joined any fellowship groups yet? The women's group is very active." She shook her head. "Not yet. I'm still getting settled." She paused, then added, "But I'm glad I came. It's been a long time since I felt at home in a church." David noticed a glimmer of pain in her eyes at those words. But before he could ask, they reached the gate of the compound where she rented a room. The building was a humble one-story bungalow, among many in the dense residential neighborhood. "Thank you for welcoming me," Esther said softly. "It's not far, but I appreciate the company at night." "My pleasure," he replied. He hesitated, then mustered the courage to ask, "Would it be alright if I visited you at the shop sometime? I would like to see your designs. Perhaps I could get a new senator suit soon." He grinned to show he was half joking. Her cheeks dimpled in a smile. "Alright, I would like that. I work at Omolara Fashions, just down the road." They said good night with a polite wave, and David walked away, feeling lighter than he had in ages. Behind him, Esther slipped inside the gate, closed it, and leaned on it with a heavy sigh of relief and apprehension. In the darkness, she pressed a hand on her chest, feeling the rapid thump of her heart. Inside her small room, Esther removed the gele from her head, letting a cascade of braided hair tumble down. The mirror on the wall caught her reflection, a beautiful, blue-eyed young woman in a simple dress. But as she undressed, piece by piece, her smile faded. Beneath the padding of her brassiere and the shapewear that cinched her waist and hips, a secret pressed painfully against her conscience. Esther, born Ezekiel Abiola, almost 29 years old, ran a trembling hand over her chest, which was flat, save for the falseness of foam padding, and down to her abdomen, where below the navel she bore anatomy that did not match the body of a woman. In the privacy of her room, she allowed herself a moment to feel the weight of that truth. "God, give me strength," she whispered, tears pricking her eyes. It had been over 5 years since she fled her hometown and took on the name Esther, living fully as the woman she knew herself to be. In Lagos, she had hoped to finally live openly, but it was not without fear. She recalled the other reason she had come to the megacity. The big anonymous city afforded safety in crowds and a chance to start over. But in her home village in Oyo State, living as a man had been a daily lie that suffocated her soul. From childhood, she felt certain she was meant to be female, borrowing her sister's clothes in secret, dreaming of being a bride someday. But when her family discovered these tendencies in her teenage years, they responded with horror. She was subjected to exorcisms at church, beatings from her father shouting that he would smash the devil out of him, and endless nights of prayers meant to fix her. The scars of those years still ached inside her. By 22, she could endure no more. Under the pretext of pursuing work, she fled to Lagos and never looked back. In the city, she found relative freedom. She traded Ezekiel for Esther, found a small community of friends who accepted her, and learned to survive. Still, every day she carried the fear of exposure. In Nigeria, where homosexuality is criminalized and same-sex attraction is widely considered morally unacceptable, trans identities are largely pushed into shadows. More than once, she had faced harassment on the streets, catcalls that turned to insult if someone perceived her voice or appearance as not matching expectations. She learned to be cautious, to always dress impeccably feminine, to soften her voice, to avoid situations where she might be found out. Loneliness had been her constant companion. Real love seemed an impossible dream. She never imagined that she would meet a man like David, kind, respectful, God-fearing, or that she could feel for someone the depth of feeling now blossoming in her heart. When he looked at her, she felt seen as the woman she was, not as a lie. And oh, how badly she wished it wasn't a lie at all. Sinking onto her bed, Esther clasped her hands in prayer. Lord, I have never felt this way before, she whispered into the silent room, her eyes closed. If this is your will, please guide me. Help me to be honest, and let him accept me for who I am. Her voice broke at the last phrase. Could David ever accept the truth? The thought of telling him made her stomach clench with dread. Men in Nigeria had reacted violently, even murderously, towards people like her when they discovered the truth. She had read horrifying headlines of beatings and lynchings, and the law offered no protection. Rather, it painted targets on their backs. In 2014, the government had enacted the Same-Sex Marriage Prohibition Act, banning any semblance of same-sex union and threatening up to 14 years imprisonment for offenders. Just being who she was could be constructed as crime. But Esther also knew she could not string David along indefinitely. She would have to tell him if their relationship grew serious. She prayed for wisdom and courage, tears slipping down her cheeks. Across town that night, David also prayed, kneeling beside his bed in his small apartment on Akarele Street. He gave thanks for meeting Esther. Father, if it be your will, let this friendship grow according to your plan, he murmured. He also prayed for purity and strength. He had made a vow to himself and to God years ago to save himself for marriage. In Lagos, many scoffed at such notions these days, but David and his family were old-fashioned in that regard. The shared religious values he sensed in Esther only made her more perfect in his eyes. Over the next several weeks, David and Esther's bond deepened. He started visiting her at the tailor shop during his lunch breaks, bringing her a cold Martina drink or a snack, and chatting as she worked the sewing machine. Sulere's open drains gurgled with runoff outside, and street hawkers passed by crying outwards. But inside the little shop was a world of bright fabrics and laughter. Esther's boss, Madame Omolara, took an instant liking to David, teasing the young couple and giving them unsolicited advice. Oko Iyawo, "Have you done introduction to her family yet?" she would say, calling him husband of the bride playfully. Esther would stiffen at such remarks, but David only chuckled, not noticing her discomfort. They spent many Sundays together, always in public or at church events. After service, they might grab lunch at a buka, sharing a plate of smoked jollof rice and fried plantains, or stroll through the bustling Balogun market, where Esther needed to buy fabrics, weaving through stores of vivid Ankara clothes and the calls of "Sister, come by. I go give you better price, come now." In the sweltering afternoons, they sometimes sought refuge at the National Theatre Gardens, sitting under the shade of ancient trees. There, amidst the distant hum of Lagos traffic and the rustle of palm fronds, they talked for hours. Esther listened with admiration as David spoke of his job at the bank, his aspirations to rise in his career, and his devotion to his widowed mother and younger siblings. He was the eldest son, and since his father's death years ago, he had helped support the family. His sense of responsibility and warmth only made her care for him more. In turn, she told him carefully curated stories of her own life. She shared that she was raised by an aunt after her parents' passing, a half-truth. Her parents were alive, but dead to her by their rejection. She described learning to sew as a girl under that aunt's guidance, and how moving to Lagos was both an economic necessity and a way to be independent. Under the golden evening light, David would sometimes take her hand as they sat side by side on a bench. Those moments both elated and terrified Esther. She loved the feeling of his strong, gentle hand enveloping hers, and the earnest way he gazed at her when she spoke. But she also feared any intimacy going further. If he ever tried to hold her close, what if he felt something out of the ordinary? Fortunately, David was unfailingly respectful, even a bit shy. Once, moved by her laughter at a joke he told, he leaned in and planted a light kiss on her cheek. Esther tensed for just a heartbeat, the first time any man's lips had touched her, then forced herself to relax and smile. Her reaction puzzled him. She seemed almost afraid for that split second. She quickly covered it by whispering, I want to take things slow. I believe in waiting, until marriage." Her words were exactly what David hoped to hear. "Me too," he assured her, relieved. He would never pressure her. He respected her virtue immensely. They agreed from that moment to set clear boundaries. No more than chest kisses and hugs. No late nights alone together in tempting situations. For Esther, those boundaries were a lifeline, shielding her secret. For David, they were a welcome sign of her beauty aligning with his. On weekends, David sometimes invited Esther to join his family for Sunday lunch after church. The first time she was nervous, fearful that his mother or siblings might somehow see through her. But she had become adept at presenting herself, dressed conservatively in a floral blouse and a long skirt, her neatly braided and voice soft. She played the role of a well-mannered young lady. His mother was charmed by Esther's respectful greetings and the way she helped serve food in the kitchen without being asked. The older woman was a tough judge. She had chased away a few of David's previous suitors with pointed comments about their demeanor or dress. But with Esther, she nodded in approval. "She's a well-brought-up girl," she said. "It's a pity she has no parents to represent her, but she has good character. That's what matters." Esther had told them her only close relative was an aunt living in a distant Ondo state, who was too elderly to travel. David's siblings had wondered in private at the lack of family, but David defended her staunchly. "Not everyone is lucky to have a big family network," he said. "We should be her family now." The siblings had smiled and let it be. As the months passed, their love grew. In the sweltering Lagos heat and seasonal rains, together they attended night vigils at church, hands clasped during fervent prayers. They volunteered on Saturdays with the church outreach, distributing food to the poor in the slums of Mushi, where Esther's heart went out to street kids and David admired her compassion. Their courtship was, to all appearances, picture perfect and awesome. To friends and neighbors, they were the ideal Christian couple, dedicated to faith, caring to each other, and saving their intimacy for marriage. Yet, beneath Esther's pleasant smiles was mounting anxiety, because she knew David was going to propose. It was in his adoring eyes, in the way he talked about her future, and casually pointed out an advertisement for affordable apartments suitable for a young married couple. Sure enough, one balmy evening after choir practice, David got down on one knee in the empty church sanctuary, illuminated by the soft glow of a few remaining candles. From his pocket, he produced a small velvet ring box. Esther's breath caught. "Esther," he said, voice trembling with emotion, "you are a blessing I never saw coming. You have made me happier in this month than I have ever been in years. I know in my heart that God brought us together. Will you do me the honor of being my wife?" Tears sprang to her eyes. This kind, noble man, whom she truly loved, was offering her everything she had quietly dreamed of: a normal life, a husband, a chance to be seen fully as a woman in the eyes of society. But the guilt gnawed at her. He did not know her whole truth. In that heartbeat of hesitation, she considered telling him right then. She opened her mouth, heart pounding. David looked up at her, knees on the hard thigh, mistaking her hesitation for overwhelm. "I know we haven't known each other long," he continued quickly, "and we will have challenges to face, but I promise to always be by your side. I love you, Esther, with all that I am." Her resolve wavered. Fear flooded her. Fear of losing him, fear of his disgust, fear of the dangerous consequences if he reacted badly. She recalled a news story from the previous year: 54 arrested just for attending an alleged gay wedding in Kaduna, and another headline of a man beaten mercilessly when found in a compromising situation. The world felt so hostile to someone like her, but David's eyes were full of love and hope. Even if she wanted to reveal herself, was this the right moment? In the house of God, where she might be denounced as a sinner or an impostor if overheard? No, not now. I will tell him later, she promised herself. Before the wedding night, I will. She forced a smile through her tears. "Yes," she whispered, placing her shaking hand in his. "Yes, I will marry you, David." Relief and joy broke across David's face. He slipped the ring, a simple gold band with a small diamond, onto her finger, and then stood to embrace her. He held her tightly, swaying with happiness. Esther pressed her face against his shoulder, eyes shut, silently praying that God forgive her deception a little longer. In that silent church, under the painted glass window of the Good Shepherd, they held each other for a long moment. The future, for better or worse, was set in motion. The months of engagement flew by in a whirlwind of preparations and prayers. Because Esther has so few relatives, the couple opted for a modest ceremony. Still, David's family insisted on honoring Yoruba customs as much as possible. A week before the church wedding, they held a traditional engagement ceremony at Mama Bisi's house in Surulere. It was a smaller affair than most, with only a handful of people representing the bright side, but it brimmed with cultural richness nonetheless. On that day, David arrived with his relatives, bearing gifts of fruit, yam tubers and kola nuts, as required by tradition. An alaga, traditional master of ceremonies, guided the proceedings, joking and singing to ease the formality. Esther's stand-in family, her elderly auntie, Auntie Funke, in truth, a compassionate family friend who knew Esther's secret, and a couple of close friends sat in place of her parents. Despite the charade, Auntie Funke took her role seriously, her eyes misting with emotion as David performed the required prostrations. Along with his groomsmen, David lay flat on the floor before Esther's family to show respect. Then he bowed alone, touching his forehead to the ground in honor of the woman who would become his wife. Applause erupted around the living room as the alaga praised him for his humility. Esther watched this scene from a doorway, adorned in her Kora Ashoki attire, a matching Iro and Buba, wrapper and skirt and blouse, with a gele tied majestically. She felt a lump in her throat. This was the moment she had once feared she would never have, a Yoruba bride's engagement, complete with tradition and family, even if borrowed. When her turn came, she was ushered in and made to kneel before David's parents, receiving their blessings. David placed the engagement ring on her finger again in the traditional rite, and the room cheered. Though her smile was radiant for the guest, inside her nerves fluttered. Auntie Funke squeezed her hand in reassurance after the formalities, whispering, "My dear, I hope you know what you are doing." Esther nodded quickly, eyes avoiding the older woman's. Now, on the bright Saturday morning of the wedding, Esther sat in a hotel bridal suit at Ikeja, peering into a mirror as a makeup artist finished her bridal look. The white wedding gown, one of her own creations, painstakingly sewn over weeks, fit her perfectly. Its lace sleeves hid her slender arms, and the high neckline gave her comfort that everything she needed concealed was concealed. Her heart pounded beneath the layers of satin and corset boning. In just an hour, she would walk down the aisle. Funke was by her side, fusing with her veil. "You are a beautiful bride, Esther," she said with a soft smile. Then her tone grew serious, and she lowered her voice so the makeup artist wouldn't hear. "There is still time. We could delay this. We could talk to him before things go too far." It was the voice of a loving conscience that had tried many times to persuade her. Esther swallowed hard, meeting her friend's concerned gaze in the mirror. She managed a faint smile. "Auntie, we have been over this. He loves me. I will tell him tonight. I just need a little more time. I can't win today for everyone." Funke sighed deeply and patted Esther's shoulder. "All right. I pray God protects you, child, and that he softens his heart when the moment comes." Meanwhile, at the church, David stood at the altar in a sharp navy blue suit, adjusting his collar nervously. The sanctuary of New Grace Chapel was decorated with ribbons and flowers, yellow and gold to match the day's colors. The pews were filled with guests, a blend of women in vibrant Ashebi attire, family and friends of the couple wearing the same yellow lace fabric, and men in crisp suits or agbada flowing robes. His mother and siblings sat in front. His mother, resplendent in her gele, dabbing her eyes with handkerchief already. She couldn't believe her eldest son was finally marrying. David himself felt almost dizzy with excitement and a hint of anxiety. He had barely seen Esther since the engagement ceremony. They had agreed to stay apart the day before the wedding, as tradition and a bit of superstition. Now he yearned for the moment she would appear and become his wife in the sight of God and man. If he had any worry, it was simply that everything goes smoothly. He glanced at his best man Tunde, who gave him an encouraging nod. The organ music swelled. Esther waited just outside the double doors. When they opened, a beam of morning light spilled into the church, illuminating her figure. She stepped forward on the arm of Uncle Emeka, a kindly neighbor, filling in as father of the bride. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd at her beauty. Her gown of pure white glistened with hand-sewn pearls, and a long veil trailed behind her. A hymn filled the air. "Great is thy faithfulness," sung by the choir as she made her slow procession. David's breath caught in his throat. He felt his heart might burst from love and gratitude. "Thank you, Lord," he thought, his eyes stinging with tears. She was an angel in white. For a moment, her gaze met his across the distance. He saw the smile on her painted lips, but could not discern the turmoil hidden beneath. To him, it was the look of joy. Esther's knees felt weak as she neared the altar. The church seemed to spin in her vision. "Steady," she told herself. "You can do this. Just a little longer." Uncle Emeka passed her hand to David, and she felt the warmth and strength of his grasp. That steadied her some. The pastor began the ceremony with a booming voice, welcoming all and delivering a short sanctity of marriage. "Marriage is a holy covenant," he intoned, "not to be entered into lightly. It is founded on love, honesty, and understanding." At the words honesty, Esther had to fight the urge to look away. She felt David squeeze her fingers gently, and she squeezed back, blinking away a tear. The vows were exchanged under a haze of emotion. David went first, his voice clear and earnest. "I, David Adeyemi, take you, Esther Abiola, to be my wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part, according to God's holy audience." His eyes shone as he slid the wedding ring onto her slender finger. Esther's turn came. She had rehearsed her words, and somehow she spoke them steadily. "I, Esther Abiola, take you, David Adeyemi, to be my wedded husband, to love and cherish till death do us part." Her throat tightened on the last phrase. A flicker of dread at how death had unknowingly already cast its shadows on their union, but she managed to finish and placed a ring on his finger in return. "By the power vested in me by God and the Federal Republic of Nigeria," the pastor declared with a joyful grin, "I pronounce you husband and wife. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." David lifted her veil. He almost trembled at her radiance. In front of the applauding congregation, he cupped her face and kissed her, a chaste, gentle kiss on her lips. It was their very first kiss of such intimacy, witnessed by all. The church erupted in cheers and claps. The choir launched into a jubilant chorus of Hallelujah as the newlyweds turned to face their community, officially Mr. and Mrs. Adeyemi. The reception that afternoon was held in an event hall in Ikeja. Lagos traffic had mercifully relented as the convoy of cars made its way there. The hall was decked in the couple's colors. Round tables, draped in white cloth, bore centerpiece of yellow roses. As custom dictated, the families made a grand entrance and dance. The MC hyped up the crowd on the microphone. "Please rise and welcome the families. Give them a round of applause." To the lively beat of a talking drum and popular Yoruba highlife music, David's family paraded in, all wearing royal blue ashoke lace to represent the groom's side. They danced in step, Mama Bisi at the front swaying gracefully while relatives sprayed naira notes on her. A prelude of money spraying to come. Then came the bride party, Auntie Funke and the few others from Esther's side, clad in gold outfits, choosing to signify the bride family. Though small in number, they were not lacking in enthusiasm. Funke danced, beaming proudly as if she were truly the mother of the bride. If anyone found it odd that the bride family was so few, they didn't dwell on it. In Lagos, as long as there is love and celebration, details are easily overlooked in the party fever. Finally, the MC announced the couple. Ladies and gentlemen, rise to your feet for our newlyweds, Mr. and Mrs. Adeyemi. The hall doors opened and David and Esther entered hand in hand. To a roar of approval, they had changed from their former attire into traditional outfits for the reception. David now wore an agbada of shimmering ivory fabric, embroidered with gold threads, and a matching filler cap perched on his head, while Esther was stunning in a gold ashoke dress with intricate beading and eagerly tied in an elaborate rose shape. They danced their way into the music, a joyful, simple dance as guests surrounded them, clapping and cheering. Almost immediately, the custom of spraying money on the couple began. As Esther and David danced in the center, smiling guests approached and began pressing crisp naira notes to their foreheads, letting the bills flutter down around them. Some older women made it a playful game, sticking bills onto Esther's forehead until they fell. Laughter filled the hall. The floor became littered with 100 and 200 naira notes, which the little bridesmaids and groomsmen eagerly scrambled to pick up. Esther felt surreal, like she was watching someone else's life. This is my wedding, she thought, heart clenching. This is real. She looked at David. He was laughing, carefree, gathering some of the notes and tucking them into her waist sash as a joke. He had never looked happier. She tried to mirror his joy, swelling under his arm. Flashbulbs popped as a photographer captured each moment. Once guests settled at their tables, caterers began to serve the feast. Plates of smoked jollof rice with stewed beef and fried plantains, bowls of amala with ewedu soup, and morsels of moi moi, steamed bean pudding, were laid out alongside an array of drinks. Bottles of Coke and Fanta called minerals, malt drinks and plastic bottles of water for everyone. The hall buzzed with chatter and high life music from the speakers. At the high table, where the couple and close family sat, a mountain of gifts wrapped in shiny paper piled up, presents from well-wishers. During the toast, David's best man gave a boisterous speech about how admirable the couple was. These two, Tunde declared, raising his glass of fruit punch, have shown us the true meaning of patience and godliness. They have kept their promise to stay pure until this very day. May your union be blessed with joy and many children. Amen. The room echoed, Amen. At that, and glasses clinked. Esther lowered her eyes with a bashful smile when all heads turned to them. Under the table, her hands clenched the napkin in her lap tightly. The mention of children made her stomach drop. She cast a quick glance at Funke, who sat a couple of tables away. Their eyes met briefly. Funke's expression was concerned, but she tried to smile encouragingly. As the afternoon sun cast a warm glow through the open doors, the celebration continued in full swing. More dances followed, the couple cutting their grand-child wedding cake amid cheers and another round of camera flashes. And a sweet moment where David fed Esther a piece of cake and she shyly returned the favor. If only every moment could be this simple, she thought as the sweet buttercream melted on her tongue. For a little while, she allowed herself to forget everything except the man beside her and the love in his eyes. They danced again, this time to a slow gospel love song playing over the speaker, obviously to the guests watching. David held her close, but not too close out of respect, and whispered, "You are so beautiful, Iyawomi, my wife." The words made Esther both elated and sorrowful. She fought the stinging in her eyes and whispered back, "I love you." It was the truth, perhaps the only pure truth she felt she had given him. As evening approached, the party began winding down. In Nigerian tradition, the couple could leave before the guests dispersed, often to prepare for their wedding night or catch an early flight for honeymoon if planned. Amid a flurry of farewells, David and Esther made their exit. Showered with confetti and well wishes, Mama Bisi hugged her son tightly and then embraced Esther, saying, "Welcome to the family, my dear. Oya, go and rest. We will see you tomorrow." There was a knowing twinkle in his mother's eyes. She was already eager for grandchildren in the future. Esther felt a chill of panic at the thought, but she smiled and nodded respectfully. A white SUV decorated with ribbons, lent by one of David's cousins, whisked the newlyweds away to their honeymoon suite. They had chosen to spend their first night at a reputable hotel in Victoria Island, opting for a bit of luxury. As the city lights of Lagos blurred past the car windows, David held Esther's hand, rubbing his thumb gently over her wedding band. His thoughts sent both love and dread coursing through her. She gazed at his face, dimly lit by the glow of street lights. His strong jaw and kind eyes, the face of the man who loved her unconditionally. In that moment, guilt nearly overwhelmed her. He trusts me completely, and he has no idea what awaits him tonight. She considered again, for the 100th time, blotting it out right then in the car, to confess everything before they were alone in that room. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Fear choked the words. David noticed. "Are you okay, love?" he asked softly. "You look a little pale. Are you car sick?" No," Esther stammered. "I'm all right, just tired, I think." That wasn't a lie. She was exhausted, emotionally and physically, from the day's excitement. He lifted her hand and kissed it. "We'll be at the hotel soon. We can rest. It's been a big day for you." He smiled with a hint of boyish mischief. "And our night is just beginning." Esther attempted a smile back, but her heart was pounding so loudly she was sure he could hear. She prayed silently. "Lord, please, I beg you, let this night pass peacefully. Don't let him hit me. Don't let him hurt me." The SUV pulled up under the portico of the Grand Pearl Hotel, one of the finest hotels in Lagos. The uniformed doorman helped them out with a courteous, "Congratulations, sir, madam," and a bellhop whisked their overnight bag. The lobby's marble floors and chandeliers gleamed. David checked them in, signed the register as Mr. and Mrs. Adeyemi, which brought a flush to his cheek and a grin to his lips. Esther stood by, clutching her small purse, hardly registering the openness around her. Her mind was fixed on what would happen upstairs. They rode the elevator in silence to the top floor, where their suite awaited. As the doors binged open, David suddenly scooped Esther up in his arms with a playful flourish. She gave a little yelp of surprise. "David, what are you doing?" he chuckled. "Carrying my bride over the threshold." Before she could protest, he was striding down the plush carpeted corridor to their door, while she looped her arms around his neck for balance. In truth, he carried her as much to inject some light-hearted romance into the heavy silence that had grown between them. He could sense she was anxious, and he thought it was simply the natural shyness of a virgin bride. He found it endearing. At the door marked honeymoon suite, he set her down gently. Both of them stood for a moment, looking at each other. David could see that Esther was indeed nervous. Her eyes were wide, and she bit her lower lip softly. He himself felt a mixture of excitement and tender concern. He had waited so long for this night, remained chaste through his youth and courtship, and now God had blessed him with a wife to love fully. But he also knew the importance of being gentle and patient. He brushed a finger against her cheek. "I love you," he whispered and kissed her forehead. "I love you too," she replied, voice barely above her breath. Her hands were trembling. He unlocked the door and guided her inside, his hand warm around hers, as the door closed behind them with a definite click, sealing them in privacy, a sense of fate sealed with it. Soft light from a single bedside lamp battered the hotel suite in a golden glow. The room was luxurious. A bouquet of red roses on the table, a bottle of champagne on ice, courtesy of the hotel for the newlyweds, and a king-sized bed draped in silky white linens, but an uneasy stillness hung in the air after the door shut. Esther stood near the foot of the bed, her fingers twisting together. David removed his suit jacket and set it aside, never taking his eyes off her. He was smiling gently, trying to put her at ease. You must be exhausted, my love, he said, stepping closer. It's been a quiet day. She managed a tiny nod. I think I should freshen up, she replied, her voice tight. She took a step toward the bathroom, needing a moment alone to gather her courage, or possibly to delay what was coming. Her heart was pounding so hard, it felt like it might burst through her ribcage. All right, Baby said softly, I'll be here. He watched her disappear into the marble-tiled bathroom and heard the door click shut. Inside, Esther collapsed against the vanity, gasping for breath as she silently sobbed. God, please help me, please, she whispered, gripping the edge of the sink so hard her knuckles whitened. In the mirror, beneath the layers of makeup and sweat, she saw a terrified person on the verge of losing everything. How could she tell him now? How could she not? I have to, she told herself. I have to tell him before he finds out another way. With trembling hands, she began to undo her elaborate head wrap, then the jewelry, stalling for time. Maybe, just maybe, if the light were off. But no, that would only delay the inevitable by mere minutes. She felt sick with fear. In her pursuit lay a small pistol, the one she had carried for years, traveling alone at night, more for threat than actual use. She had debated leaving it at home today, but brought it out of habit, hidden under the folds of her wrapper earlier. Now it was tucked in her purse on the dresser outside. It gave her no comfort. She would never hurt David. If anything, she feared he might hurt her once he knew, but she had chosen to trust him with her life by going this far. Steeling herself, Esther splashed cool water on her face and wiped away the smeared massacre under her eyes. She removed the padded bra cups from inside her bodice, knowing she couldn't keep them on. Underneath her gown, she still wore a tight girdle. She considered leaving it on to hide as much as possible, but that would only make things more shocking than removed. No, better to review on her terms. Perhaps if she explained, if she begged forgiveness, he might understand. A desperate, unrealistic hope, perhaps. After several long minutes, David knocked lightly. Esther, are you alright? His voice was concerned. She jumped. Yes, I'll be out in a moment. She realized she had been in the bathroom for a long time. Taking one last shaky breath, Esther decided how to do it. She would come out in a robe, sit him down, and tell him the truth outright before he touched her. It was the only way now. She removed the wedding gown, carefully hanging the precious garment on the hanger. As though stalling again by fusing over it, finally she donned the hotel's plush white bathrobe, wrapping it tightly around her body with armor. Her secret was still concealed beneath the robe and the girdle around her waist, but not for long. With a prayer on her lips, she opened the bathroom door. David was at the minibar pouring 2 glasses of champagne. He looked up and smiled with relief that she was back. There you are. I was worried. He offered her a glass. A little celebration for us, Mrs. Adeyemi, he said warmly. Esther's stomach churned. She waved off the champagne. "David, we need to talk," she said quietly, her voice not as firm as she wanted. She gestured for him to sit on the edge of the bed with her. Sensing the seriousness in her tone, his smile faded a fraction. He set the glasses down. "Okay." He joined her on the bed, concern etching his brow. "What is it, my love?" Esther's mouth felt dry as sand. The words refused to form. Up close like this, seeing the tenderness and love in his eyes, she nearly lost all courage. She looked down at her hands clasped in her lap. Her wedding band gleamed under the lamp. "For better or worse, I have to tell you something. Something about me that I should have told you long ago," she began, voice trembling. Her eyes were already welling up. David frowned slightly but reached and took her hand, stroking it. "You can tell me anything, my love," he said softly. "It's all right." He was completely unsuspecting, only thinking perhaps he was anxious about the intimacy or had some health issues. "I never wanted to hurt you," she continued. I was spilling faster, panic rising. "Everything I've ever said to you, everything I felt, it was real. I love you truly. Please remember that." His frown deepened with worry. "You are scaring me, Esther. What's wrong?" She drew a shuddering breath and finally forced the words out. "David, I was not born a woman." A deafening silence followed. David blinked, not comprehending at first. "What do you mean?" he asked as if misheard. Esther felt faint. She had to be more clear. She stood up on unsteady legs and with trembling fingers began to untie the sash of the bathrobe. Perhaps the visual truth would speak where her voice failed. Tears streamed down her face as she opened the robe and let it drop to her waist. Underneath, she still wore the tight compression girdle over her torso and hips. I'm so sorry," she choked out. With that, she put the girdle down, revealing the final truth that had been hidden from him. The masculine contours of her lower abdomen, the telltale lines of her physique. Within her thighs, not the female anatomy he would have expected of his virgin bride, but the genitals of a person assigned male at birth. For a second, David just stared as if his mind could not register what his eyes saw. His beloved wife, in the soft light, he saw her breasts were only foam inserts, now cast aside, her hips slender and straight without the padding, and below, "Jesus Christ," he gasped, staggering back off the bed. What is this?" David, please," Esther begged, covering herself back up hastily and stepping towards him. "I can explain. I was born male, but I've lived as a woman for years. I'm a woman in here." She pressed a hand to her chest. "In my soul. I never meant to deceive you. I was going to tell you, but I was afraid. I love you. I didn't want to lose you." Her words came out in a frantic rush, but David only heard fragments through the rolling in his ears. He stumbled further until his back hit the wardrobe. His face had turned ashen, eyes wide in horror and fury. You are a man?" he whispered, voice low and dangerous. He couldn't bring himself to use "she" at that moment. Everything felt like a grotesque joke. The room spun, his stomach lurched with a mixture of betrayal, disgust and rage. Esther stepped closer, reaching out. "I'm still me, David. I'm still the person you fell in love with," she cried. "I never wanted to hurt you. Don't touch me," he bellowed. Slapping her hand away, she stumbled back, frightened by the sudden violence in his voice. In all the time she had known him, he had never so much as raised his voice at her. Now his eyes burned with furious fire. "All this time, you lied to me?" "I had to," she sobbed. "You know how our society is. I was afraid. I I thought maybe after we married, I could make you understand." David let out a sharp, bitter laugh that held no humor. "Understand? That my wife is a man?" He ran his hand over his head in agitation, as if he could not believe this was reality. His world began to fracture. Every intimate conversation, every dream of children, all suddenly mocking him. He thought of the congratulations from his friends, the pride in his mother's eyes, and imagined their faces if they knew the truth. He imagined the whispers, the scorn. He married a man. The thought made something snap inside him. He had upheld his end of purity and trust, and this was how he was repaid. "You made me a fool," he snarled. "All of you and whoever put you up to this, a godly man, and you tricked me into perversion." Esther shook her head desperately. "No, it wasn't like that. I love you, David. I'm not a man. I'm a woman, just not biologically." Her attempt at explanation only inflamed him further. His upbringing, his beliefs, everything screamed that this was an abomination. His hands trembled, face contorting with a mix of anguish and fury. "Shut up!" he roared. "Just shut your mouth!" He began pacing wildly. He felt something deep within him collapsing. The love he bore turning into a tidal wave of rage and humiliation. His eyes darted to the nightstand where his phone lay. He had half a mind to call the pastor, the police, anyone, but then an even darker thought arose. He had to cleanse this stain. This person, in his view at that moment, had defied the sanctity of his marriage bed, made a mockery of him before God and man. Hot, irrational anger coursed through his veins, drawing out any voice of mercy or reason. In that frenzy, David lunged towards the corner of the room where their travel bag sat. From it, he pulled out the small handgun he always carried on long trips for protection. An old pistol his late father had given him years ago after they were robbed on the road. He had packed it out of habit, never imagining he might use it tonight. But now, it felt like the only thing he could trust. Cold, solid metal in a world gone mad. When Esther saw the gun gleaming in his hand, she felt ice flood her veins. "David, no, please," she screamed, backing away until she was against the bed. Her hands instinctively went up, palms outward. "Please, put that down. I beg you. Let's talk." But David's face was twisted beyond listening. "You lied to me," he hissed, advancing on her with the gun raised. "You made me break God's law without even knowing. You filth!" The slur hit her like a slap. She had never seen such hatred in his eyes that once gazed at her with love. Esther's legs gave out and she crumpled to her knees, sobbing, I'm sorry. She didn't know if she should stay still or try to flee. There was nowhere to go. He was between her and the door. Perhaps, if she could get past him, or her body felt frozen in terror. "David, please," she whispered through tears. "Don't do this. I love..." A thunderous explosion deafened them both as the gun went off. For a split second, Esther didn't realize she had been shot. The sound was overwhelming, and she felt a force slam into her abdomen, knocking her backward. Then came the pain, an awful, searing pain, loosening just below her ribs. She gasped, a strangled cry escaping her lips as she clutched at the sudden wet warmth spreading through the robe. Crimson blood seeped between her fingers. She looked up at David in disbelief, her eyes wide, lips moving without sound. David stood over her, chest heaving, the gun still extended in his shaking hand, the muzzle smoke faintly. The room smelled of gunpowder. His eyes rang from the blast. He stared at the spreading red stain on the white robe, at Esther's face contorted in pain and shock. In that instant, Reality snapped back. What had he done? The robe at Esther's midsection grew redder by the second. She tried to speak, a soft gurgle of words. David. Her trembling hand reached out to him, either in forgiveness or pleading, but then it fell limp. Her body slid sideways onto the plush rug. She lay there on her side, eyes glassy and unfocused, breath coming in shallow, rapid raps. David dropped the gun as if it burned him. Oh God, no, he muttered. The adrenaline that had fueled his wrath drained, leaving horror and regret in its wake. He knelt beside her, panicking. Esther, no. He pressed his hands to the wound to stop the bleeding, but blood oozed around his fingers. It was so red against the stark white of her robe. Her life's blood spilling out because of him. What have I done? He choked out. Her eyes fluttered, tears slipping down her cheeks. Perhaps she still saw the man she loved somewhere behind her terror. With the last of her strength, Esther raised a trembling hand and touched his face lightly. Her blood smelled his cheek. No, she tried to say, but the words didn't come. A final shudder ran through her body, and then her hand fell away. Her body fell still, her eyes fixed on some distant point past him, their sparkle fading. No, David cried. He cradled her head, feeling the warmth leave her. A kneeling wail tore from his throat, an animal sound of loss and anguish. Esther, please, stay with me. But Esther was still, her last breath escaping as a quiet sigh. In a moment, the light in those eyes that had danced with life that very morning as she danced with him, dimmed into emptiness. David rocked back on his heels, hands slick with her blood, and stared at what he had done. A strangled sob burst from him. Oh God, what have I done? He screamed into the empty room. The hotel corridor was not empty though. The gunshot had rung out beyond the suite. Within minutes, urgent knocks came at the door. Hello, is everything alright in there? A man's voice called. The security personnel. More pounding followed. David was numb. He did not respond or move. He knelt in a daze on the carpet, holding Esther's lifeless body, rocking and weeping. All the rage had evaporated, replaced by an overwhelming grief and horror. Wake up, please, wake up, he mumbled, as if this were just a nightmare to be shaken off. But the blood on his hands was real. The weight of her body in his arms was real. With no more answers from inside, the hotel staff eventually unlocked the door with a master key. 2 security guards and the hotel manager cautiously entered. The scene that greeted them made one guard recoil in shock. The manager gasped, hand flying to her mouth. Jesus Christ! One of the guards swore under his breath as they saw a bride in a blood-soaked robe on the floor and the groom covered in blood, hovering over her with a wild look in his eyes. The guard quickly radioed, voice urgent. We have a shooting incident in suite 709. Get the police here now and an ambulance. Hearing these words, police ambulance, David slowly lifted his gaze from Esther's body. His eyes were red and vacant, tears streaming down his face. I didn't mean to, he stammered softly. The gun lay on the floor, a foot away, glinting under the light. The second guard, keeping a wary eye on David, carefully picked up the pistol and set it aside. Sir, step away, he said firmly. David did not resist as they pulled him gently away from Esther and led her flat to check for any sign of life. One guard felt her neck for a pause and just solemnly shook his head. The manager had already broken into sobs at the tragedy unfolding in her hotel. Within 10 minutes, the suite and hallway were swarming with police officers. The wail of sirens and flash of red light from vehicles outside reflected on the walls. Crime scene tape was quickly stretched across the door. Hotel guests peeked from their rooms, down the corridor, curious and alarmed, only to be ushered back inside by stern officers. Byvee sat on the floor in handcuffs, drenched in his bride's blood, as detectives snapped photos and uniformed policemen backed orders. He was very calm now, silent, his eyes fixed on nothing. In the chaos around him, he caught fragments. An officer reading him his right, another officer whispering in confusion as they inspected Esther's body. One young officer emerged from examining the victim, face pale. He murmured to the lead detective, "Sir, the victim appears to be male." The detective, a grizzled man with tired eyes, glanced over, taking in the wig and makeup. His expression tightened, but he simply nodded. "I see. Well, male or female, it's murder all the same," he replied quietly. "Let's stay focused." He approached David, who sat catatonic. "Why did you do it?" he asked, not unkindly, but David didn't respond. He wasn't even sure if David had him. They hauled David to his feet and led him out in handcuffs through the service elevator, away from the gathering crowd in the lobby. As they guided him into the back of a police van, flashes went off. A journalist or bystander snapping pictures. "That's him, the groom," someone whispered. "He shot his wife." "Now wow, what a world," another muttered. "They just married today and see what happened." "He must be possessed," an elderly woman in a headscarf said, crossing herself. "God forbid such evil." David didn't react. He sat where they placed him in the van, staring at his red-stained hands, which had started to dry tacky. It didn't feel like reality, more like he was watching someone else's life crumble. In his mind, images flashed. Esther laughing under the sun at the park, Esther singing in church, Esther's face when she said yes to his proposal, and then Esther lying on the floor, eyes lifeless. He squeezed his eyes shut, as if he could erase that last image. The cell was small, its concrete floor damp and cold. Morning light barely filtered through a high, barred window. David sat on a wooden bench inside Lagos State Police CID cell, his back against the wall. They had taken his bloodied shirt as evidence. Now, he sat in a plain white undershirt provided by the station. Dry blood stained his hands and arms, which he hadn't bothered to wash. Perhaps a part of him felt he deserved to wear that blood, like the mark of Cain. Somewhere down the hallway, a police radio crackled and sporadic chatter echoed. Normal life of the station continued, but in David's world, time had stopped at the moment the gunshot rang out. He had not spoken a word since his arrest. When they booked him, he answered questions in hollow monotone, staring through the offices as if they were not there. Name, age, occupation. He had himself given the answers, detached and distant. When asked for next of kin, he numbly gave his mother's name. He wondered how long it would be before she got the call. Perhaps she already had, or perhaps news had reached the community by gossip. Lagos grapevine moves quickly. Indeed, outside these walls, the story had begun spreading, though warped and sensational. Groom kills cross-dresser bride on wedding night. Some headlines would say, others latched onto the scandal. Newlywed discovers wife is man, commits murder. The tragedy was already losing its human face in the world beyond, turning into fodder for debate about morality and deception. But none of that noise penetrated the cell, where only David's weird breathing and the distant drip of a leaking pipe kept him company. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, burying his face in his blood-streaked hands. When he closed his eyes, he saw her again, Esther. Was that even her name? He realized he didn't truly know. They had a past, a whole life she never shared. Who was she really? He thought of the gentle, soft-spoken woman who prayed with him, who comforted him when he was down, who became the center of his world this past month. That person fell through, and yet, what he saw last night suggested to his shattered mind that she was also somehow a stranger. Anger flickered in him again when he thought of the deception. How she had kept such a fundamental truth from him. But the anger quickly gave way to sorrow and remorse. because despite it all, he still loved her, or the idea of her he had known, and in his rage, he had destroyed her. If it was a sin, she lied. Hadn't he answered with a far greater sin? He had taken a life, not just any life, but the life of the one he had sworn to love and cherish. The weight of that pressed on him like a crushing stone. Footsteps approached the cell. David lifted his head to see a police inspector standing outside the bars, accompanied by another man in clerical clothing, a pastor. David recognized him dimly. It was Pastor Emmanuel from New Grace Chapel, his own pastor. Word truly traveled fast, or perhaps the police, knowing the circumstances, had called in a religious counselor to handle him. The inspector turned the key and led the pastor inside the cell, then stepped back. Pastor Emmanuel, a portly man with kind eyes, looked at David with profound pity. "My son," he began softly. He reached out to place a hand on David's shoulder, but David flinched away and scooted to the far corner of the bench. He couldn't bear any comfort. He didn't deserve it. The pastor sighed, lowering himself onto the bench at a slight distance. "I came as soon as I had. Your mother, she's beside herself with grief. She wanted to come, but I offered to see you first." At the mention of his mother, David closed his eyes, fresh tears escaping. What was of hers would he ever be able to meet now? He had destroyed not only his life, but shattered his family's honor too. And he had taken from his mother the daughter-in-law she had grown to love. No matter who Esther really was, Mama Bisi had loved her like a daughter. "They told me what happened in basic terms," the pastor continued gently. "This is a terrible, terrible tragedy. I'm not here to judge you, David. Only God can do that. I'm here to offer whatever comfort I can and pray with you, if you will let me." For a long moment, David said nothing. Then, in a hoarse whisper, he finally spoke. "There is no use praying for me, Pastor." Pastor Emmanuel looked at him sorrowfully. "There is always need for prayer, especially now. You have committed a grave wrong. For God's mercy, I killed her." The words came out cracked. David opened his eyes and stared at the cell bars as if seeing something beyond. "I killed the woman I loved. How can God forgive that? I can't even forgive myself." Pastor's face crumpled with empathy. "Son, I know you are hurting. What you did, it cannot be undone. But you must not lose your soul entirely over this. The Lord says, 'Come, let us reason together. Though your sins be as scarlet, it shall be white as snow.'" David let out a shuddering breath. Scarlet, like the blood still staining him, white as snow, like the wedding dress Esther had worn, now likely bagged as evidence drenched in red. He shook his head slowly. "Her blood is on my hands, Pastor," he whispered, voice broken. "I loved her, and I killed her. Nothing can change that, not even God." He expected a reprimand for his blasphemous despair, but none came. The pastor simply bowed his head, tears in his own eyes. "It's true that nothing can bring her back. We can only seek forgiveness and try to understand, somehow, what lessons God wants us to learn from this pain." He paused, then asked, "Did she ever explain why she lived as a woman? Perhaps understanding that might ease your heart a little." David's mind flashed to Esther's pleading words. "I'm a woman in my soul. I was afraid. I love you." Remember the raw fear in her voice, the agony in her eyes when she thought he might reject or harm her. In the rays of anger, he hadn't truly absorbed it. Now, bits and pieces replayed in his memory. He thought of how perfect she had been during their courtship. Too perfect, perhaps. Always composed, modest, saying exactly what a good church girl would. Was it all an act? Or was it truly who she was? Just with a secret underneath. He recalled the subtle inconsistencies, her reluctance for physical closeness, her aversion about family. At the time, he had dismissed them. She must have lived in constant dread that he would find out. How much courage must he have taken her to even go through with the wedding, hoping against hope that love would conquer truth? It was a misguided tragic hope, yet, perhaps, it came from a place of genuine longing to be loved and accepted. I think Byvee began haltingly. She did it because she believed she was a woman inside, and because she loved me. She didn't want to lose me. Admitting that twisted the knife of guilt deeper. She had loved him enough to risk everything, and he had repaid her by snuffing out his life. The pastor nodded quietly. The heart is complicated, my son. We cannot fully grasp what she went through in a society that does not understand people like her. It doesn't excuse deception, but it does invite compassion. I'm so sorry that you both were put in such an impossible situation. Compassion, that was something David failed to show last night. He buried his face in his hand again. If I had just walked away or even called off the marriage, anything would have been better than what I did. A strangled sob escaped him. I wish I could take it back. God, I wish I could just wake up and find this was all a bad dream. Outside the cell, the situation bustle continued as routine. But in that dim enclosure, time stood still in mourning. The pastor prayed softly under his breath. Byvee didn't join him. He felt unworthy to pray, unsure if anyone was even listening. All he could think of was Esther, her laughter, her shy smiles, her joyous singing, and ultimately her dying breath. Till death do us part. She had vowed, till death do us part. He had repeated, and indeed death had parted them far too soon, an oath kept in the most twisted way. Now he was alone, and would likely be alone for many years to come, in prison or perhaps on death row if the court deemed it murder with intent. But no sentence could match the punishment within his own heart. Hours later, after Pastor Emmanuel left and the cell block grew quiet, an officer brought David a sheet of paper, a statement form to write down his account of what happened. They left him with a pen, thinking perhaps he might open up more in writing. David stared at the blank page for a long time. At the top it read, Statement of the accused. He wrote his name mechanically, then a question, motive for your action. His hand trembled. What would he possibly say? Because she lied? Because society taught him to hate what she was? Because she was shocked and terrified of what it meant about his life and his love? None of it justified anything. In the end, all he wrote was, I was angry and I lost control. It felt woefully inadequate. He dropped the pen. As dusk fell on Lagos, the call to prayer from a distant mosque mixed with the drone of traffic outside. In the cell, David curled up on the bench, finally allowing himself to weep fully. Great heavy sobs of a man broken. He cried for the love that was real to him and now forever gone. He cried for the woman who called herself Esther, whose true name he might never know, whose face would haunt his dreams for the rest of his days. He cried for his own soul, damned by his hand. No comforting voice answered in the darkness. No hand came to pat his back this time. The tears fell into an unending night, and in that abyss of grief and guilt, David Adeyemi could only whisper a final apology to the silence. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But the words rang hollow, unheard by the one to whom they mattered most. The consequences of that night would reverberate endlessly in his life, in the lives of those who loved him, and in the silent void where Esther's life used to be. Outside, Lagos carried on with its ceaseless motion, a city of millions where tragedies happened and quickly became yesterday's news. But for those entangled in this web of love, identity and violence, nothing would ever be the same. And in the quiet of his cell, as the last light of the day disappeared, David sat awake in the darkness, utterly alone, consumed by a nightmare of his own making, a nightmare from which there will be no escape. This story of David and Esther is a deeply emotional tragedy that reflects powerful themes of love, identity, fear, and violent consequences. It ends with a heart-wrenching reminder that deception and societal pressure, when combined with unchecked anger, can lead to irreversible destruction. Lesson: walk away before you destroy a life and your own. When faced with a difficult truth, especially those that challenge your beliefs or expectations, choose to walk away with dignity instead of responding with violence or hatred. No matter how shocked, hurt, or betrayed you feel, your response defines who you are. You always have a choice, and choosing peace over havoc is a sign of true strength, not weakness. Esther kept her secret out of fear, a fear created by a society that punishes people for who they are. David, driven by betrayal and societal shame, let rage consume him, but in the end, he lost everything. If David had walked away, he might have been heartbroken, but he will still have his freedom, his conscience, and most of all, Esther will still be alive. Let this story be a reminder: when emotions run high, take a breath, walk away, and choose life over destruction. Thank you so much for watching this amazing story about David and Esther on African Stories by Byvee. If you learned a lot from their story, please show your support by clicking the like button, sharing with your friends, and leaving a comment below. To see more interesting stories and learn about different cultures, subscribe to African Stories by Byvee. And do not forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Your support means a lot and helps us bring more stories to you. Until we meet again, stay connected, stay inspired, and keep smiling.